Welcome, mobile home park investors, real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and others who just see value beyond the surface. Welcome to the Mobile Home Park Desktop, where I bring you all the latest news and analysis about the mobile home park world from my desktop. Today's main topic will be on Sun Communities, who just released their Q1's earnings report for 2020. We'll get a lot of insights into how they did last year, as well as how they have been handling the COVID-19 response. Just as a disclaimer to start off, this is not any type of investment advice. I do not own any shares of Sun. I'm not planning to buy any shares of Sun. I'm just a numbers and data geek, and whenever I find information that's publicly available, especially with an operator like Sun, who owns 140,000 lots across the US, then I want to dive in and I want to see what they're presenting and see what sort of insights that I might be seeing, and also share that with you. Also, when it comes to feedback and comments on content, please give me your feedback. I know a lot of what I've been covering has been news and analysis and kind of topical issues, but if you're interested in learning more about like how to invest in mobile home parks, how to find deals, how to operate parks, all sorts of stuff like that, let me know. Give me some feedback in the comments. I am thinking that I might even start a separate series focused just on investing in mobile home parks. So without any further ado, let's dive in and find out what we can learn from Sun Communities Q1's earnings report. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over what is a REIT, because Sun Communities is a publicly traded REIT. It is the largest publicly traded REIT that's focused on manufactured housing communities or mobile home parks. They have a mix of mobile home park communities, as well as RV communities, as well as mobile home and RV communities. So let's talk about what a REIT is. It's a real estate investment trust. That's what the REIT stands for. And it's an entity that receives revenue through owning or financing income producing properties. So a REIT is a company that owns a lot of other properties. Almost think of it as collects different properties. And they can also finance properties and do some loans. And they can also own other shares and stocks in other REITs and other properties as well. So REITs can be private organizations here, or they can also be publicly traded on a stock exchange. So Sun Communities is actually publicly traded, but there are private REITs as well. And because Sun Communities is publicly traded, that means you can go onto the stock exchange and you could fire up your Ameritrade account or your Wells Fargo account or whatever account you use to purchase stocks if you wanted to, and you could buy shares. Now that Professor Dan is done with that explanation of REITs, but let's dive into Sun Communities, which is the focus of this week's show. And let's take a look. Let's start by understanding better what their portfolio actually consists of. So you can see here in blue, these are all areas where Sun owns properties. The largest portfolio is out here in Florida, 44,695. You can see they also have a sizable number of properties in Texas, in California. What's interesting to note is where they don't have properties. So they don't have properties in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Mississippi, as well as New Mexico, Wyoming, Idaho, and Washington. So I guess there's two ways to look at it. One, why don't they own there? What do they know that maybe other people don't know? Or on the other hand, another way to look at it is maybe there's some more opportunity here because you're not competing with big boy in Sun Communities. You also have here Vermont and Rhode Island, where they don't own communities. And in case you're wondering, every time I glance to the left, it is because I am referencing a map. So now let's take a look here at the composition. So they own 141,000 sites, 63%, so 266 are mobile home communities, 122 RV communities, 34 that are blended mobile home and RV communities. 44% are age restricted. So age restricted means that you have to be over a certain age in order to live in those communities. So these are geared or targeted toward retirees or older people. And then you have 56%, which are all age communities. So all age, obviously that means families, anyone can live there. So 71% of their revenue comes from manufactured housing. 12% from the RVs. These are annual RVs, and 17% from transient RVs. So there's a big difference between annual RVs and transient RVs. Transient RVs are the people that drive in, stay for a while, and then drive out. Whereas annual RVs are the ones that stay there year round, or at least they have year round contracts. One of the things that Sun does, and you'll see later on in their statistics, is they try to get transient RVs to convert to annual RVs. And that's a better business model because then you have a more consistent stream of income. And that it's also something where if you're turning around and trying to get a loan from a bank later on, they are going to give you much more credit for your annual RV sites as opposed to your transient RV sites, as they see that transient RV site, that stream of income as being less reliable. You'll also see, as when we talk about the Q1 earnings call report, that their transient RV business is the one that took a huge hit. Since the annual RV business, since you're on annual contracts, collecting rents from them functions a lot similarly to just people who are living in the manufactured housing community. So you can see there's a big disparity between the streams of incomes from the annual RVs and the transient RVs. All right, here's some more information. This is something interesting. You can see here, Sun is right in that average between 2 and 4%. That's what they typically have in terms of annual increases. Sun is an example of a very stabilized owner-operator, 95.5%, really high occupancy rate there. And 70% are at 98% plus. You can see here there's 21,400 transient RV sites. So this is a big chunk of RV sites. And when we look into their Q1 numbers, we'll be able to dive deeper into see how COVID-19 has affected these transient RV sites. Transient, again, means people who are coming in seasonally. That means they don't live there at the park year-round, or they don't have yearly contracts as well. And you can see here, as we talked about earlier, they try to convert on average about 1,100. So 1,100 of these transient RV sites, they're converting to annual sites on average in a year. As someone who spent a lot of time on the acquisition side, I'm always interested to see how acquisitions are for other groups. As you can see here, $815 million worth of communities. So 46 communities, 10,300 sites that Sun added in 2019. That's almost $1 billion of folks. That's a lot more than I did in 4 years. So, I mean, obviously these are the biggest guys. They have probably the most money to spend, and they are definitely growing. 10,300 sites, do the math on that, the calculation, that ends up being about $80,000 per site. That's what they're spending per site. So if you have 100 space site, 80,000 times 100, that's about on average what they're spending on purchase price. So that's a metric that we often look for when we're starting to underwrite deals, to get just a sort of a baseline of how much we should be paying for a mobile home park. Typically, you see prices range somewhere between 25 to 35,000. In nicer markets, it might go from 35 to 50,000. Definitely, if someone's paying $80,000, they're buying the nicest parks out there. And that is what Sun Communities focuses on. They focused on what's known as institutional quality assets. So these are assets that have, you can see here, they have a community house, they have lots of amenities, they have sidewalks, they have off-street parking, lights. I mean, it's just all the bells and whistles when it comes to a community. And so it's kind of interesting. Let's keep that in mind, but we're going to go down a little bit later and we're going to talk about the actual housing costs. All right, so now this is one of those stats that gets all the mobile home park people who are looking to invest very, very excited. And if you're in the apartments, this is one of those stats that gets you very, very envious. Take a look at this. Yearly, a tenure of residence. Let's take a look at the second stat first. 14 years. So that means on average, residents in Sun Communities are staying 14 years. So if you can imagine that, compare that to your average apartment vacancy, 1-2 years, people are gone. That is quite an amazing stat. And that's, really when I started looking at mobile home parks as a potential investment vehicle, that's one of the stats I looked at. Again, we're talking about Sun Communities. We're talking about top of the line, highest quality, institutional quality assets. But just from an anecdotal stories, I'll come across when I'm looking at deals and I'll talk to the owners and I'll ask for rent rolls so I can find out like how long residents have been there. And sometimes I get responses like, wow, it's been so long. They've been here so long. I don't even have the, when they originally moved in. It just seemed like they've been here forever. Some people are like, hey, these residents have been here longer than I've owned the park. So that's also a response that you often hear. Keep in mind that a resident staying for 14 years, more than likely that person is actually owning the homes. So if you're buying mobile home parks and you're actually renting out the units, if you're in the rental business, then your numbers are probably going to skew differently than that from here, unless you can find a way to actually sell off the homes. So again, this is what Sun Communities is doing. This is not a proxy for what you should be doing. You can't just automatically assume your residents are going to be there for 14 years if you're going to underwrite a deal, but at least it shows the promise and prospect of why people are very excited about investing in this asset class. So you can see here, it says here that move-outs are less than 1%. So only less than 1% of people are moving out. But when you dive down deeper, what they're actually saying is that less than 1% of the homes are being moved out of the communities. So resident move-outs, home leaves communities. What's that mean? What that means is that when a mobile home is placed in a community, that home is more than likely going to stay in that community forever. But what happens when the resident wants to move out? Well, see the 6.3%? The residents will sell their home to someone else who wants to live in that community. So as you can see, less than 1% of the homes are actually being physically moved and carried out and taken away. And as a mobile home park owner operator, that is probably the worst thing for you. You do not want those homes to be taken out because it costs a lot of money and time and expense to refill the lots once they're taken out. And as you can see here, less than 1%, that is a pretty good number. So, all right, let's go on. Let's continue. Another thing that is really exciting for mobile home park investors is looking at the average annual NOI growth and comparing that to other industries. These are some of the metrics that as mobile home park investors, when we see things like this and we see such a huge advantage here in mobile home parks compared to apartments and other, the rest of the REIT industry, mobile home parks are exceeding them in terms of annual growth rate, same community NOI growth. Those are some really good positive signs for the industry and things that get us as mobile home park investors pretty excited. So this is really neat the way that Sun has organized their presentation because, right, as soon as they show you how much growth there has been in NOI since 1998, they go to the very next slide and they kind of show you, well, why that might be because of the advantages of mobile home parks in terms of pricing. So you can see here for a 1,250 square foot mobile home in Sun Communities, on average, the residents are going to pay $997 per month, whereas other rental options in the same markets are going to cost about $1,000. For 1,000 square foot, you're going to be paying about $1,600 per month. So mobile homes can definitely, that's one of the advantages that we're bringing to the market, the most affordable option for many people within an area. And so one final note I want to offer on this as well, and this is something that I believe Charles Becker, PhD researcher from Duke University, I think he's the only PhD researcher who's actually doing a lot of research on mobile home park communities. And I might be getting this statistic wrong because I've heard it secondhand. I haven't actually read the source material. From the 1950s, if you just follow the rate of inflation for the 1950s, then the average lot rent in the US should be around $500. Instead, the average lot rent in the US is around $300. And so that also might be one of the reasons to explain why there has been so much NOI growth here is there's a lot of that sort of subsidizing that has been happening from past community owners. And as new community owners, if you come in and you're improving the communities, making it nicer, there is some room for you to push those lot rents up because they are probably under market for the most part. And then just one more statistic on manufactured homes versus single family homes. 78,500 for a brand new manufactured home, as opposed to the average single family home, which is now $297,747. Very, 2 years worth, 2x median income versus 7x median income. While this is a great statistic, just keep in mind when you're looking at mobile home parks to buy what the options are for the resident that you're attracting to your community. The residents in your community aren't even thinking about a single family home, and instead what they're really comparing the value to is to the apartments. And that's actually another thing that Charles Becker had come up with in some of his research, was that typically speaking, single family homes are not the competitive housing option for people who are living in mobile home parks. The competitive housing option is apartments. So when you're thinking of it from that standpoint, what really matters a lot is this other statistic here. How much is rent for the apartments versus how much can someone rent either a manufactured home for you or buy a mobile home in your community? What's their all-in monthly rent going to be compared to, say, if they wanted to go to apartments? I'm just going to go over these last two stats quickly. But according to what Sun is saying here, when you compare total returns of Sun Community versus the S&P 500, which is in green, versus MSCI US REITs, which as far as I understand is like a collection of REITs, almost like a ETF of REITs, you can kind of see how manufactured housing, or in this particular case, Sun Communities, has outperformed all of them. And one last one here, again, Sun Communities obviously at the very top here, manufactured housing in general, self-storage, and then the rest just in terms of indexed NOI growth over time. Alrighty guys, one last thing I wanted to go over today, and these are my notes from Sun Communities Q1 2020 earnings call. So just taking a look at some of the things that jumped out to me. Number one, the NOI reduction. So they actually had a Q2 NOI reduction guidance of between $15 to $18 million. What that broke down to is about 10 million of that was because of the loss of revenue and income from the transient RV business. The entire month of April, there was no transient RV business because of lockdowns. People couldn't go to their RV. So they essentially have lost 1 month of income. So going forward, Sun Communities was on the earnings call. We're saying that they expect things to return to normal in May. We'll see whether or not that's happened, I guess, in the next earnings report, or if you live nearby a Sun or RV community, and see whether or not they're open. There's $15 to $18 million loss. 10 million is due to the RV loss, and 5 to 8 is due to diminished home sales and some other income associated with the loss of income from RVs. So they said their rent forbearance program, they said only 2.9% of mobile home residents have actually asked for it. The way their forbearance program will work, you won't have to pay rent for the month. And then I think starting in June or July, then they'll have 12 months of payment up for that. So that's how that thing is working. But I guess the good news for them is only 3%, less than 3% have actually applied for some sort of forbearance, which brings us to this number, which is awesome. Their portfolio, they have collected 98% collections as of April 22nd. For the annual lease sites, we talked about this earlier. You can see if you have an RV site where people have annual contracts, look at that, 92% of them have paid. So that's great. And then obviously the transient, they had close to zero because their parks were closed. So 26,000 annual sites, 22,000 are transient sites. Total portfolio occupancy, about 97%. And some interesting things to see here. So they don't really have any decrease in occupancy projected. So let's take a look at some of the other numbers here. So home sales. So home sales, they said 763 in Q1 2020, which is down from 798. So it's about a 4.4% difference. Of that, new home sales volume is also slightly down. Rental home conversions, that's actually up. So rental home conversion is when you have a renter and you offer them some sort of incentive. Maybe they're on a rent credit program and they've been able to save off enough money to actually buy their home or a similar home that they're in, or for whatever reason they decide that they want to become a homeowner. So you convert the renter to a homeowner. Conversions are up, and then that's an interesting stat there. Maybe some of them decided to buy their home out so they can have a lower monthly rental payment, maybe because of some sort of job uncertainty, or they're just thinking long term they want to just reduce the amount of rent they'll have going forward. Maybe another thing, maybe subsidy checks came in and people were able to afford or put together a down payment to actually buy their homes. One other thing that showed a positive note is web applications. So although applications overall, and I'm assuming this is for people to live in one of their communities, is down by 13%. People applying on the web has jumped up 111%. So if you are a community operator or you're about to acquire one, understanding that the web and having a very strong web presence, it seems like through COVID-19, everyone's getting used to working from home. Everyone's getting used to video conferencing, and maybe people are becoming a little bit more used to doing things even more on the web. And so, they're showing here that 111% increase in their web applications. If you don't have some sort of web-based way for your tenants to apply for housing, maybe that's a project that you can work on going forward. It may help you capture more leads. So overall, web applications used to be 19% in 2019, and now it's at 45%. Last thing I want to talk about here, acquisitions opportunities. So they didn't get into really any specifics other than to say that yes, they still had a pipeline and they were still actively looking at things. But a couple of things that they noted on the call: properties that had not previously been for sale potentially coming to market. So this is one of the theories that we have, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, is that we might have more tired landlords, people who decide that they just don't want to be in this industry or in maybe any type of housing industry, or maybe people who are closer to retirement saying, hey, look, I don't want to go through this again. Now is the right time to retire. And the Sun is speculating that things that were had not previously been for sale may be coming up for sale, and they'd actually been approached by a few people who had started those conversations. Properties that had been for sale but not priced appropriately. So again, this I think ties into the tired owner type argument. Maybe owners who are just tired and deciding, hey, that price, that ridiculous price I wanted before, I'm willing to come off it and get this deal done. And just to stay on this for a moment, if you are looking to buy your first mobile home park, keep in mind that what the seller is offering is not necessarily the market price for that. Remember, buyers are the ones that are setting the market prices. And if no one wants to buy that mobile home park, then at that price, and that's not the market price. So I know a lot of people feel like the seller's offer, or what the seller is listing at, is kind of a starting point. And maybe it is for the seller, but it shouldn't necessarily dictate what you think the value of it is. If you learn how to underwrite these things properly, stick with your underwriting. There's many ways to look at this. If you want to get a deal done, you're going to have to offer fair prices. At the same time, what the seller is listing it for is not necessarily the market or fair price. And the last thing here, properties that were potential acquisitions, but Sun hadn't moved forward on them. This is another thing that they're seeing. Acquisitions that they had thought about, kicked the tires on. Now they may be thinking about moving forward on them. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Mobile Home Park Desktop. Please do me a favor. If you watched till the end, hit that subscribe button that's down below, or it's over here or somewhere around here. And that way you can be kept up to date to the latest content that is released. As I mentioned before, I am giving some serious weight and consideration to producing content that's not only analysis and updates on the news, but actual how-to content. I think I'll probably separate that out for people who are interested in that. Give me feedback if you want to know how to underwrite properties, if you want to know how to manage properties. If you're more interested in the how-to, you're like, hey, look, Dan, all this industry stuff is interesting and great, but I want to know more about how I can actually get into it, then let me know. Give me the feedback. The only way I know what kind of content to produce is to hear from people who are watching. So go ahead and do that. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate all the comments I get. I appreciate all of you who have subscribed. And I can't wait to produce next week's episode. So once again, this has been the Mobile Home Park Desktop, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.